Go ahead and get started. I know that there are some folks in the waiting room coming in, so as they come in, they'll kind of sort of join the conversation a little bit midstream, but we'll go ahead and get started in the interest of time. I'll do a quick introduction of how our morning will proceed. We're just together for an hour and there'll be plenty of time for questions at the end. I also want to introduce one of my colleagues with me, a student, a senior from the class of 2020 at Mount Holyoke College, who is joining us. And so I don't know if we can turn the screen to Ashley Jones.
Hello, everybody.
Perfect. Thanks, Ashley. I will introduce myself and I will let you know a little bit about who I am, and then I'll turn the floor to Ashley so that Ashley can share her story. And I'm so grateful that Ashley could join us today. It's been really great to connect with our current students, even if virtually, and to be able to hear their stories, because I really do think that hearing a story, hearing sort of the path and the journey of a current student at Mount Holyoke will give you a really good sense of who you can be at Mount Holyoke. And so I'm really excited for you to hear from Ashley. But before that, I'll just introduce myself quickly. My name is Aria Lawson. I am I'm an assistant director of admission at Mount Holyoke College. And I'm also the multicultural recruitment coordinator for the college as well. And so I work very closely with Ashley, who is one of our diversity outreach fellows, as well as a number of my colleagues in the office, to think about how we can be intentional in our recruitment of all individuals across the college. I also am very lucky to be the territory manager for North Carolina. So I get to travel in the fall to many different cities and towns within North Carolina and get to know students, their guidance counselors, their teachers, their community-based organizations directors. I get to work with incredible scholars who are really perfect fits for Mount Holyoke. And so I'm excited to talk about what a good fit or a perfect fit for Mount Holyoke looks like. But I'm also just excited to connect with you to give you a taste for what does it mean to look at a women's college. What does it mean to think about Mount Holyoke from an application standpoint? And I'm excited to connect with the juniors in the room, but then also any of the parents or teachers or guidance counselors out there who have some questions as well. But before I get into that, I'll turn it over to Ashley to share a bit of her story. All right, Ashley, thanks so much.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So I'm coming to you live from Miami, Florida, where I'm finishing up my last semester. And I guess I'll start my story in my junior year as well, because that's the year that I realized that like I wanted to go to college. I had always known it was a thing, but until my junior year, I didn't realize that it was something that was going to be in the past for me. So my junior year, it was like the first year that I took some AP classes. I took AP US history. And I was like, oh, like I can do this. Like I really like this history thing. Like, okay, where can I go do this? Like where can I go do this? Like where can I take this to a bigger level? And so like I started to look at colleges, and originally like I was looking at in-state colleges because I am low income and first gen and kind of wanted to be near home. But as I started to look in state, I realized that maybe I could go out of state too, and that would be a really cool experience, and it would be something that like no one in my family had done. So I was like super excited to like maybe get the chance to do that. And so I met a girl at my school who got the scholarship to go to a place called Mount Holyoke, and I was like, well, what is Mount Holyoke? Like we're 1,000 miles away. I had like until that point never heard of it. And she started to tell me about Mount Holyoke, and I was like, that sounds like a place I want to be. Um and the idea kind of left me until senior year came around and that scholarship was up again, and I was like, well, I'm not usually the type of candidate that would get that, but what's the worst that could happen? The worst is they could say no, and then I'm back where I started. And for me, a no wasn't going to be any different from like the position I was in at that point. So I decided to go for it, and I got the scholarship. And then like by December, so December of my senior year, I knew I was going to Mount Holyoke, and everything had kind of changed within like a week. So like I got my acceptance, and I was super excited, super pumped. I was like, okay, college, all right, like what is this? Like any Google, any thread on Twitter, any any type of information I could get. I was like reading it because I had no one to really talk to about it. Um, and I was just like super excited. Like I think it was one of the like most excited times in my life because I was just like anticipating like this huge move to this new place. Like before then, so I had maybe been to Georgia. I've been to Georgia and Alabama, and then I was 17, getting ready to move to Massachusetts. So it was super exciting. So when I got to Mount Holyoke, it was so different from what I was used to. The people were different. The weather was obviously different. The food was different. The way, even the way like people greeted people was different. Like it was definitely an adjustment. Um, I think I'll say like it probably took me about a year to adjust to Mount Holyoke, but after that year, it was definitely the best decision that I ever made. So I'll start like with my first year. So when I got to Mount Holyoke, I kind of was like had always wanted to be like a business person. Like I got to Mount Holyoke and I was like I want to do business. But Mount Holyoke's a liberal arts school, and so I was going to make my own major. But at the same time that I was like trying to figure out my major, I also like really got into French, like really got into French because learning taking a semester of a language is one of the requirements at Mount Holyoke. And so I took French for the first time, and I was like, I kind of like this language learning thing. Like, let me see where this goes. And so I was like really getting into French and also really getting into business through like our entrepreneurship track at Mount Holyoke. And I was like, okay, like we have to step back and we have to like figure out what we're doing. And I realized that I couldn't make my own major because I wanted to study abroad. I just knew that learning French in books wasn't going to work for me anymore. Like I felt like I kind of absorbed everything that I could through books, and I just needed to go. And then I studied abroad in my junior year. Um, so I had only taken French for 2 years, and then I decided, okay, I'm gonna just go because I think that's just the best way of learning, and it's kind of like the way that I've learned all my life. And so I did that my junior year fall, and then I came back. And when I came back, campus just kind of looked different. I'll say it was just so crazy, and I was so thankful for some of the things that like I was so thankful for Mount Holyoke because when I went to France, I got to like compare the education system. And I realized that Mount Holyoke really does care about our students. Like I could definitely like walk around a French university and like no one knew who I was. But when I was at Mount Holyoke, like professors would know professors would know my name and ask me how I am. My friends would just be like, if I left the class and my face looked confused in class, my friends would be like, or people in the class who didn't even know me would like stop me as I was walking out the door and be like, did you understand? Do you want to meet over like coffee and talk about like what happened in the class, or email me and ask me how I'm doing on my paper? And so like those type of things, those type of support networks that aren't wasn't necessarily, you know, something that we advertised was something that helped me through my Mount Holyoke career, just like the community that is there. Um, and so as far as like extracurriculars, I really got involved in like French club. I really got involved in APAU, which is like an affinity based club for students of the African diaspora. And I really got into my job, so much so that they feel like student clubs because I got so close to some of the other student workers. Um, and so for me at Mount Holyoke, it really was, I would say, a balance of just like making sure I had my schoolwork done and making sure like I was reaching out to everybody. So like whether that means like going to office hours and speaking to my professors and saying, hey, like I'm a first gen student, um, and I'm not used to this. Can you go over the instructions one more time, or can you give me some more background information because I don't think I'm coming from where everyone else is coming from, or whether that meant asking for tutoring for my French classes. I was doing that and trying to balance um, schoolwork and making sure that I had all the support that I needed to succeed there. And then also trying to talk to myself and make sure that I know you only have so much time for so many clubs. Like if you want to sleep and have time to eat, you need to pick three max, and then you need to, focus on those. And so that's just kind of been like my Mount Holyoke journey in summary. So it's basically just been a lot of anthropology. So I didn't mention, but I majored in anthropology with a nexus in global business. So it just consisted of a lot of anthropology, a lot of Afrikaans classes, mostly English classes, because I'm the type of person where I love to read, but when you're in school, you don't have as much time to like read for fun anymore. And so one way that I decided like I'm gonna make sure like that's a priority in my life is taking those Afrikaans classes that weren't necessarily a part of my major and I didn't have to take, but I definitely took for joy. Um, and then French, just always taking a French class, always just kind of like trying to improve that language because like I grew up in Miami again, and I was always so jealous of everyone in Miami who's bilingual. And so I knew like when I got to college that like if I was gonna leave with one thing I didn't come with, it would be like another language. Like who can say they did that? Like yes, the degree matters, but like what are those tangible skills that you can leave my Holyoke with? And I chose learning a new language. So that's kind of like my Mount Holyoke story. Um, I'm trying to see if I forgot anything. I think that's pretty much it because like looking back on it, it's kind of hard to just condense into like 10 or 15 minutes. But it definitely had its ups and it definitely had its downs. Um, but that's college everywhere. I promise you. Like I definitely like would call my friend who goes to USC, which is a little closer, like in LA, which is a little closer to Miami. And I just realized that like we were all going through the same things in different places. And I just really fell in love with like the way the Mount Holyoke community and Mount Holyoke faculty and staff supported me like through those ups and downs. So
All right, thank you so much, Ashley. And there's a question in the chat that I just want to highlight. You spoke a little bit about some of those resources, so thinking about office hours and thinking about your extracurriculars, the students in those organizations, and also in your jobs. After your sort of difficult year of transition or just acclimation, right? The difference between Miami and Western Massachusetts, that transition, it takes a bit of time. And so can you just speak to what were the factors that allowed you or motivated you to be excited to return for your second year?
mm-hmm. um it's a good question. I think for me, um the hardest part about adjusting to Mount Holyoke wasn't Mount Holyoke's fault. It was kind of like not to blame anybody, but it was kind of like me being intimidated to reach out to
Mm-hmm.
people, and I kind of isolated myself. And so I was just like coming from Miami where everyone's like tough and no one wants to like make the first move. And so I like kind of brought that mentality with me and I found myself like being just kind of isolated because I wasn't like reaching out to the communities that like now they're family to me. Um so I think like that was one of the things that like I wish I had known. Kind
Mm-hmm.
of just saying like, okay, like classes are gonna be classes. Like for me, school was never like the school part was never like the difficult part. it was like the easy part because it was what I could throw myself into, and it was something that I knew for a fact that I can conquer. Like, I know that there are steps that I can take to get this A in this class, or to feel like I have like succeeded in this class. But making it feel like home for me was like the part that I struggled with the most. So I think towards the end, like towards, I'll say like late March, my senior not senior year, my first year, I eventually started like talking to people, and then like within those 4 weeks we became really good friends. And then the summer went and I came home and I was like, I kind of like those people, you know what I mean? And I started to compare like home to Mount Holyoke. And I don't know if that's helpful for anyone else, but for me, I was like, okay, like when I came home, that was what really made me realize that I needed to go back, because I was like, okay, I can quit now, and where will I be? Like, I'll be back at home. Like, I'll be like in my mother's house, which I'm thankful for her. But you know, like I'll be in my mother's house, and I won't have what I like really, really want and really, really need to be in a better place in life. And so for me, it was literally like coming home and realizing, okay, like this is my position in life. This is where I stand in society, and I don't want to be here anymore. And everyone has like a way to get out. But like for me, going back to Mount Holyoke and getting my degree was like my way out. And so like that was really my biggest motivator, just coming home and like looking around, and also talking to friends that I went to high school with. And I was like, oh yeah, so like this is what I've learned, and I'm so excited, and you know, and everyone was just like, what are you talking about? And I was like, okay, like in that year, Mount Holyoke had changed me quite a bit. And I was like, I like this change, you know, like this is good change for me. And I want to be around people who are just as excited to talk about the things that I'm excited to talk about.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley. And I really appreciate being able to share this space. So I've worked with Ashley. I knew her as a student, like when I was a student, and now I work with her, and I've seen her grow over 4 years. And so it's really incredible to share this space with her and to hear her offer advice and to hear her reflect on her story, especially in her last semester as a senior. I'm just really grateful to hear how you've grown. As a Mount Holyoke alum myself, I have my own story that is a little bit different than Ashley's, but still has some of the same values and some of the same themes, right? Of finding joy in learning and finding community and finding connection and stumbling a few times. Certainly that's college, that's life, but also finding the folks who are going to be there to pick you up. And Ashley is one of those folks for me. And I'm just excited to be able to see her share her story with you. And so with that, I'll kind of shift gears and start talking about the history of Mount Holyoke a little bit, and then also the application process. And feel free, if you are joining us, to put questions in the chat and interrupt me. I'm happy to kind of break up my speech with answering some of the questions that you may have, but I also may answer some of the questions as I continue to speak. So feel free, however you are comfortable, to engage with my session. So just so you know, as Ashley has mentioned, Mount Holyoke is a liberal arts college. We are also a women's college. We are in Western Massachusetts, about an hour and a half from Boston and about 3 hours from New York City, easily accessible by Peter Pan bus, by Amtrak train, and also if you have a car or if your families have cars, you're able to connect that way as well. I travel, I've been to Boston many times. I also travel to New York City in addition to North Carolina as a part of my travel territories. So I'm pretty used to connecting between the areas and can attest to how simple it is. But I just give you that a bit of information to sort of geographically contextualize where Mount Holyoke is. A huge part of our identity, though, I've already mentioned, is that we are a women's college. And what is so important and what's so valuable for me to kind of share is that a women's college, as Ashley has mentioned, is a place to find connection, to feel empowered, to engage, and to kind of challenge yourself with the way that you think, with the way that you learn, and with whom you engage. At Mount Holyoke, we were the first of the 7 sisters, which is this entity of women's colleges, these 7 institutions who in the 1800s were founded as the counterpart to the Ivy League colleges. The Ivy League colleges, right, many of them were founded in 1700s. They didn't welcome women into their spaces, and it wasn't until 1837 when Mount Holyoke was the first, and Mary Lyon, our founder, to say, I think there needs to be a space for women. There needs to be a space where women can learn, where women can feel prioritized, not to just learn to become a wife, but to learn chemistry and to learn religion, to learn how to engage and have dialogue. And so Mount Holyoke, being the first, really paved the way for women's education as we come to know it now. We still talk about ourselves as a part of the Seven Sisters. So the other sisters or siblings being Smith College, which is another women's college, Wellesley College, Bryn Mawr College, Vassar College, which is now co-ed. So they're still looped into the Seven Sisters, but sort of a sibling now, so to speak. Barnard College in New York City. And then we also have Radcliffe, which is now a part of Harvard, and doesn't have its own unique programming in the same way that it used to. But that group of colleges really is a sort of historical entity and really has done incredible things for the path of women's education. Certainly, we are not the only women's colleges in the nation, right? We have a daughter college founded by Mount Holyoke alumna, Mills College in California. We also have a number of women's colleges. We have Hollins, Mary Baldwin, Spreetbriar in Virginia. We also have Salem College in North Carolina, as well as Agnes Scott and Spelman in Georgia. So there are a number of women's colleges. I also did not name all of them. So know that there are women's colleges all over the country that share these values of empowering women to have conversations and to really explore who they are. In addition to being a women's college, we also are gender diverse and are truly global in our diversity as well. So we welcome students who may identify as non-binary or trans. We also welcome students from 61 different countries and 45 different states. When we think about who we were in 1837, sort of at the start of women's education, there were about 100 students in that first year, and most of those students were sort of from the New England area. Most of those students were white women. And so Ashley and myself probably would not have been on the campus, right? But even at the end of 1800, I believe we graduated our first international student not from Canada in 1893. Even at the end of the 1800s, we were still paving the way to welcome students with different backgrounds. We welcomed our first non-white student, Hortense Parker, at the end of the 1800s as well. And so thinking about how have we continually been at the forefront of welcoming diverse identities into our space is really an incredible legacy to be a part of. And so that's just a bit of history of who we are as Mount Holyoke and how we value our community and really think intentionally about who we invite to be a part of that community. And so I'll take that segue sort of to jump into how we think about applications, because we really think about all aspects of that diversity when we are thinking about applications and when we think about the science and the art that it takes to really craft a class. This year, we're sort of in the midst of welcoming and engaging with our admitted students from the class of 2024. So many of the seniors in your lives right now are hopefully the incoming class of 2024, whether it's at Mount Holyoke or a different institution. And so we're thinking about what they may need to help make a final decision about saying yes to Mount Holyoke. But in the fall and also in the beginning of the summer, we start to turn our eyes to serving the class of 2025 and what it looks like to welcome you to our communities and what you need. What are the tools that you need? So I'm glad to be able to offer this sort of short webinar to really give you a sense of, to give you the first tools that you need to start engaging with colleges like Mount Holyoke. And so I'll begin to talk about our application process and how that factors into what it means to be a strong student, what it means to be a strong applicant, and how you can make your way to our gates so that you can become a student like Ashley and really share your story out. And before I do that, I just want to take a peek at the chat to see what the question is. The history of Mount Holyoke seems to be part of the core values. How does that get embedded into a student's education and experience? And that is actually a really great question. So before I start talking about the application section, I actually want to have both Ashley and myself answer that. And so Ashley, I'll repeat it again for you because I think as a current student, you can really talk to the history and the traditions that we share. And I think it's helpful to hear about that before we even talk about the application. So thank you. So Ashley, the history of Mount Holyoke seems to be a part of the core values. How does that get embedded into a student's education and experience? And so why don't you start with sharing maybe your favorite tradition and what that tradition has meant for you?
Okay, so Mount Holyoke has so many traditions. And I guess my favorite would have to be, just kind of like Mountain Day. And I'll talk about like why this is important to like classes as well. So Mountain Day is like ancient, and Mountain Day comes in the fall, and no one knows when it is except Sonia Stevens, who's our president. And she decides on a random day during the fall that like today is the day that classes are canceled, and everyone will hike the mountain, or if you're like me, you'll take the bus up to the top of the mountain and eat ice cream with your friends, and kind of like get little like fake temporary tattoos, and just like really like enjoy. Like my Holyoke's beautiful. Like I wish you all could see it. Like it's beautiful, and it's in the valley, which means like it's surrounded by kind of like these mountains. Like they're not huge, but they're there. And one of them is named Mount Holyoke, and on Mountain Day, that's where we go. We eat ice cream on Mount Holyoke, and it's a beautiful tradition. And I guess I'll like how that is embedded in like the student's education and experience is kind of saying that like there's always time for a break. Like we live in a society, in a culture here where it's like work, 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 and you go and you exhaust yourself until like you have nothing left. And at Mount Holyoke, that's just, I'm not going to say it's not the case for some people, but if you want to take that break and you want to take care of yourself and you want to care for yourself, it is very possible to do that. Like I just come from like a family where again it's like work, 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 you work until you can't work anymore, and that's how success is achieved. But going to Mount Holyoke, I'll say like I learned that it's also important to rest. Like it's also important to take that time and reflect. Like it's also important for you to know that like it's okay to take a break. Like you will still be successful, and like the things will get done. And so like what better way to tell your students to take care of themselves than to just cancel the classes and tell them to hike for a day. So like that's just one of the traditions that I think it's one of my favorites, and it also like speaks to like kind of like the experience at Mount Holyoke, where it's like we work hard, but we also rest hard, you know. Like we also just make sure like we're taking care of us, because I think that like your parents can probably like tell you like once you leave college, like it's like you don't have a choice. But while you're in college, like you do have a choice to kind of like reflect on who you are as a person. Like Mount Holyoke is the type of institution where yes, you're here for the education, but you're also there to like kind of leave as a better person, and leave with some of those values, if not all of the values of Mount Holyoke, instilled within you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ashley. And I'm glad you led with Mountain Day, because as an alum, that's still one of my favorite traditions. And I think the Mountain Day especially, but many of our traditions like our Pingy Day, which is sort of our Earth Day, end of spring semester celebration, some of the holidays and celebrations that we have embedded throughout the semester. Mountain Day is one that follows you actually into your alumhood. So as an alum, I know when Mountain Day happens, part of it because I'm still a staff member, I still am connected to the community, but also we get an announcement to the alum. You get an email saying, hey, alums, it is Mountain Day today, so connect with your hubs. We call them Mount Holyoke hubs in your city. So I know that there is one in Durham. I know that there's one in Atlanta when I travel there, in Philadelphia, all over the country and all over the world. And so even in the past 2 years that I've been traveling during Mountain Day, I've been able to connect with alums in Chicago, alums in Philadelphia. Sometimes I'll connect virtually with my friends and we'll eat ice cream together. Usually when you're an alum, your days are a bit busier, so you only have time for the ice cream, but sometimes you'll get together. And what's really special is that Mount Holyoke, because it was founded in 1837, that's a huge number in our mind. So we have a residence hall named 1837, but we also get together at 1837. So that's actually 6:37 p.m. And eat ice cream. And so that's the tradition that still carries on. And I have connected with alums who graduated 20 years ago, who graduated just 2 years ago, who are graduating, who graduated a year before me. And so it's really incredible to have traditions like that to follow you, because it really feels like, okay, this is a community that not only did I opt into it as a high school senior and was there for 4 years, but I get to keep that community with me, and I get to see them grow up and have them see me grow up. I get to have kids with these folks and go to grad school with these people and find new jobs with these people. And so it's really exciting to be able to share that. And so I'm glad, thinking about traditions, thinking about who we are as a community and who we want to be a part of our community. And I'm going to take that and sort of jump back into the idea of applications and what does it look like to apply to a liberal arts liberal arts college, a small liberal arts college like Mount Holyoke. And so I know that there are many colleges out there. There are thousands and thousands of them, and all of them have sort of different application processes depending on how big they are. So what's really great about small liberal arts colleges is that we as a college, our incoming class is usually about 525, 530 students. So when we think about how many applicants we have, it's definitely scaled down compared to the schools where there are about 5,000 or 10,000 students in their first year class. So at Mount Holyoke, we welcome about 4,000 applications each year. We have 12 people who read those applications, and each of those individuals, as I mentioned before, is a territory manager. So for me, I first read, I am the primary reader for all applications from North Carolina. I also have a few other states and major cities under my belt as well. And I have 11 other colleagues who either read domestically or internationally. And so it means that we get to become the experts on those territories. And what's so important about that is because of how we read, it's really important that not only do we pay attention to the essay and to all of the pieces that make you who you are, but also pay attention to where you come from. So we're thinking, when we're looking at applications, I know that when I'm reading an application from this specific high school, that this high school doesn't offer dual enrollment courses, so I'm not going to take a look at those, or I'm not going to look for them in a student's transcript. But this school does offer them. And so maybe I hope to see a student challenge themselves by taking those college courses. Or if a school has international baccalaureate options or AP classes that a student can take, or maybe they're a school where in your senior year, you're taking a lot of your classes in the fall, and then you're doing an internship in your second semester. So your classes, your academic load is going to look a little bit different than a high schooler who goes to a different high school. So it's really important about the territory management system that we have is that we are experts on that area so that no student is disadvantaged when they come to our pool. And just to give you a sense, of the 525 students that we have in the first year class this year, so this year's class of 2023 that are going to become sophomores next year, they represent about 480 high schools. So it gives you a sense of, okay, there are a lot of people out there with different educational experiences. And so I'm really glad actually that there's someone like me who can be well-versed in where they're coming from, so that we're not comparing apples and oranges, but that we're really looking intensely into what kind of student this is and where are they coming from and what do they have access to. So that's something that we really care about in our application process. And so with that, I'll kind of get us started in what are the individual pieces, right? A lot of liberal arts colleges, as you juniors begin your college search, you may start to visit large colleges, large state universities, small liberal arts colleges, and you may or may not begin to hear the word holistic. And so when we think about holistic, we think about it in terms of the way that we review applications, and it really just allows us and reminds us to be intentional about the way that we look at the whole application, or we really consider every individual piece to make up the entirety of your profile. And so what that allows us to do is to not only weigh the transcript and the test scores, but to also look closely at the personal essay and the recommendations and the extracurriculars. And so I'll kind of go piece by piece to let you know what about them is important and why we take a look at them. So the first piece that we look at is the transcript. As I mentioned before, that is what's going to help us understand your high school context. So that transcript is going to let us know, okay, this student does have access to APs, and oh, look, they took about 3 of 5 APs, or they took 9 of 25 APs, right? So we're going to get a sense of what do you have available to you, and then what did you take advantage of? Your transcript not only tells us what high school you go to and what you've taken advantage of, but it shows us the amount of rigor that you have. So what are the honors, AP, IB, dual enrollment courses that you have taken advantage of, and when have you taken advantage of them? But they also show us what we call course progression. And that course progression is really important, especially juniors, as you're thinking about your senior courses. It really lets us know, okay, this is a student who said they're interested in humanities, but I'm really glad they took that 4th year of science and math, because by the time they get to Mount Holyoke, perhaps they decide they're interested in economics or in entrepreneurship organizations and societies, which is our sort of business minor. Perhaps that 4th year of science or that 4th year of math is going to really help them in their transition to a place like Mount Holyoke. What's unique about Mount Holyoke, and Ashley touched on this a little bit, is that we have what's called distribution requirements. So those requirements, there are 7 of them. The 7th one is a pretty fun one. It's PE, so you can take a springboard diving class or table tennis or walking for fitness, but the 6 academic ones range in discipline. And so being fully prepared and fully developed in your high school curriculum will ensure that when you're fulfilling those distribution requirements, of which they're just 6 semester courses, so you can get them done with pretty quickly, you'll be prepared to take advantage of those. And so that's something that we're looking for when we're looking at your transcript. We're also looking at your essay, and this is where you can truly shine, right? What happens in your first year and your sophomore year of high school, you don't really have control over that once you get to your senior fall, but your essay is something that you have control over until the very last moment that you press submit. So I encourage you, as you go into this summer, as you take time to be with your family and to be with your friends in a different way, right? Like this is a very sort of not normal way that we're going through our life right now. As you take time to be reflective, also maybe take some time to think about your essay, and think about maybe not your essay, but who are you and how do you want to tell your story? Because that maybe in a few months is going to help you think about your essay. And that's a space where you get to tell us who you are. If we have maybe 5 students from your school applying, maybe your transcripts are going to look pretty similar, but the essay is going to be a space where you can tell us about how important your grandmother is, or how fun that summer was that you hiked the mountains with your mom, or what it meant to get your Girl Scout Gold Award. And so really take that space to tell us who you are, and you don't have to try to impress us with something that you think is life-shattering or anything like that, but definitely make sure that your voice is heard, and having someone that you trust, like your counselor or your friend or your parent or your teacher, read over that before you submit it to make sure it sounds like you, is going to be really helpful. And before I continue, I just want to take a look at the chat to see what questions have come in. So when you're applying to colleges, did you consider co-ed schools? And so actually this is a question that I'll actually hold just so I can talk about the last part of the application, and then turn that over to you if that sounds okay, Ashley. So the next part of the application that we have is the recommendations. And these are recommendations for the juniors in the room. I urge you to just take one moment and think about who are the teachers in your life who you know would already write a stellar recommendation, who you feel really comfortable in the classroom with, who you know have taught you a lot, even if it's not necessarily about the subject, who have been really great mentors. Those are folks who are going to be really important adults to ask for recommendations. You can also ask faith leaders, you can ask coaches, you can ask bosses, anyone who you think is going to be able to speak to who you are, whether that's in the classroom, in a leadership role, in a school organization, but really be mindful and start thinking ahead of time, who are the adults who I want to ask to write recommendations. At Mount Holyoke, we require 3 recommendations, 1 from a guidance counselor or college counselor, and then 2 from a core teacher. So a teacher who's teaching you math, science, language, history, or English. We also welcome extra recommendations from people, like I said, in your faith group or who supervise you at work or who are your coaches. So definitely be mindful of who you're asking and how many recommendations you're asking. And then after that, of course, we're looking at extracurriculars, and I already touched on that. Extracurriculars is a space where maybe that's going to inspire you to write something about it. We've had people who have been involved in the climate march, who have done their Girl Scout Gold Awards, who work part-time for 20 or 30 hours per week, who take care of their family members who are on the debate team or who are triversity athletes. Anything that you do that has shaped who you are is really important. And so do know that we want to see that. It doesn't have to be something that you did for 3 weeks, because that's not going to tell me much about who you are. But absolutely, if it's something that you put in a number of hours in, even if it's you are teaching yourself ukulele or teaching yourself to learn German, that's awesome. Tell us about that, because that's going to help us get a sense of who you might be at Mount Holyoke, which is the ultimate goal, to see how you fit with us. After extracurriculars, we have our need-based aid and merit-based aid. And so I'll talk about that very quickly. Our financial aid is something that's really important to us, that makes it possible for almost all of our students to go to Mount Holyoke. As a small liberal arts college, there's no difference between in-state and out-of-state tuition. So the ticket price, or the sticker price as we'll call it, is something that applies to everyone, but about 62% of our students are receiving some sort of need-based aid. That need-based aid is calculated based on your FAFSA and your CSS profile, and our colleagues in Student Financial Services are really incredible support systems and resources to help figure out what does that look like for you, what does it look like for your family. I also urge you to visit our website, where there are tools called the Net Price Calculator, as well as My Intuition, that will help you and your family get a sense of what your financial aid package might look like. We also have merit-based aid, and that's based on your sort of leadership and your academic performance, and those scholarships range from $15,000 to a full tuition scholarship, which is called our Trustee Scholars Program. And right before I shift to answering some of the really great questions in the chat, I'll also just mention our test policy. So you may have noticed that in talking about the application, I didn't even mention testing. And that's because we are test optional, and we have been test optional for almost 20 years. We recognize that 4 hours on a Saturday, when you may be tired or may have forgotten breakfast or may have just not had time to prepare in the same way as others, may not be, and sometimes is not, the best indicator of how you'll perform in high school or in college. And so we have understood that for a long time, especially in light of what's happening with COVID-19 across the globe. A lot of colleges are also adapting their test policy. So if you know that you are not a strong tester or don't want testing to be a part of your application process, take a look. There are a number of colleges out there. You can work with your mentors here at the Emily King Center, but take a look and to see, okay, if testing is not a place where I shine, or I don't want that to be included in my process, or I don't have time to take a test, or testing has been postponed or canceled for whatever reason, know that there are a number of colleges out there who have been test optional for as long as us, or who are just test optional for this upcoming year. Know that there are also options out there. All right. Thank you. And so I'll answer some of the questions. And so Ashley, if you want to answer the question I mentioned earlier, which is, were you applying to any co-ed colleges?
Yeah, so I actually didn't apply to any co-ed colleges. Um, I got into Mount Holyoke so early that I didn't have a chance to apply to any other schools. But I will say, when I comprised, made up my list of schools I wanted to apply to, I think most of them were co-ed. Gender was just not something that was on my list. For me, when I did find out that Mount Holyoke was a women's college, it wasn't something that made me not want to come. I was just like, oh, okay, cool. Especially because we have the 5 college consortium, so we are in very close proximity. With a 20, it's 20 minutes to get to, 45 minutes to get to UMass, which is kind of the furthest school, and then this it's a 20 to 30-minute ride to get to Smith, which is also another school in the consortium. I just always knew that there would be an opportunity to be around men. But I will say that I love going to a women's college. Um, I just feel like I see men in my regular life. Like I have a father. Like I go to the grocery store still. Like we have professors that are men. And like like I got enough of them. So like being in a space where like there's only like women or non-binary people is like actually really nice because there's like a sort of, I don't know, like a solidarity, I can say, that like is really strong when there are like no men in the room. Like it's really really nice to see. So yeah, I didn't really consider gender, and I'm not like upset that I went to a women's college.
Thank you. And Ashley, I'm glad that you mentioned the Five College Consortium, because in addition to sort of leading the charge with the Seven Sisters, the Five College Consortium is actually an immediate community that every Mount Holyoke student has access to. And the five colleges include UMass Amherst, which is our large state university, so they have about 30,000 undergraduates, but we also have Smith College, which is another women's college, Amherst and Hampshire colleges, which are two small co-ed liberal arts colleges, and then Mount Holyoke College. And together we form the Five College Consortium. And what's magnificent about that is that you actually have access to take classes, to use the libraries, to be a part of student organizations at these different school communities. And so not only do you opt in and sort of pay the tuition for Mount Holyoke and one institution, but you then get to, for free, go to all of these other institutions where you can easily be in the lab of a professor at UMass or be on a dance group with someone at Smith College and really access some of those resources. And because of how tightly bound we are, we also have some majors that are cross-disciplinary, or rather cross-institutional. So our architecture major and our dance major and our film major are all five college majors. We also have certificates in public health, in marine sciences, and indigenous studies. I believe we have about 15 of those. So there are many ways that you can connect with those other colleges. And because we can take classes off campus, about 77% of our students do take classes off campus. There are many students who also come take classes on our campus. So that does mean that we have male identifying students in our classes. We also have male professors. And so we do have a really dynamic and engaging community to learn from. And one of the next questions is, what are your most popular majors? And I'll kind of list them all and then go ahead and answer them. So one of our most popular, I'll kind of name the top five. So as a liberal arts college, students can pursue majors across the spectrum. We also have about 30% of our students who choose to double major. You do not have to double major in things that are the same. So you don't have to double major in biology and chemistry, but you could. I have a dear friend who majored in biology and history, or neuroscience and Spanish, or geography and Spanish. And so there are a lot of ways to combine your interests, but our largest majors, and that's what I mean by top, is economics, English, biology, computer science, and psychology. And so even though outside of those five, we have about 43 other majors that students can pursue, those are sort of our largest majors, but even our smaller majors are still very well resourced. You can pursue research. I know Ashley has done a bit of research through anthropology. You can do independent studies. You can study abroad under that major as well. So there are a lot of opportunities to still be in really strong majors. What percentage of students' financial need does Mount Holyoke meet? I'm really proud to be a part of an institution that meets 100% of demonstrated need. And when I say demonstrated need, I'm talking about the need that our colleagues calculate based on the FAFSA and the CSS profile. So those pieces are really important to submit. I think there's a 5-day grace period between when you submit your application and when you have to submit financial aid materials so that your package can be delivered at the same time. But those are the two pieces that help us get an understanding of what your family is able to afford and how Mount Holyoke can meet the rest of that. And so that is where that 100% comes from. Whatever the gap is between your family's contribution or your estimated contribution and the full cost of tuition is what we commit to meeting. And our packages, We do have loans in our packages, and a few of the other things that are included in the package is any merit aid you might have received, work study, as well as grants. So the package includes loans, grants, work study, and merit aid. And that includes, those are for Pell eligible students as well, just to clarify. Perfect, and that actually ties perfectly. So what are your application deadlines, types, and dates? Mount Holyoke, we offer 3 different rounds of applications for traditional age students, both domestic and international. So we welcome early decision 1 deadline, that is November 15. We offer an early decision 2 deadline, that's January 1. Both of those deadlines are students who are opting into a binding agreement. So if you are admitted an early decision, you are committed, you and your family have made the decision to commit fully to attending Mount Holyoke if you are admitted. When I was a high school student many years ago, I applied early decision 1, and similar to Ashley, it was the best decision I made, and I'm still here kind of promoting the same thing. We also have a regular decision application, and that is January 15, very similar to other colleges. That's non-binding. We pull in most of our students from regular decision. So about 60% of our students are coming in that we admit are coming in through regular decision. So in terms of advantage or kind of what is the best course of action for you, that's really up to you and your family and your support system to decide. It really is based on how committed you feel both financially and sort of emotionally to choose Mount Holyoke. But all 3 options are really valid. We also have transfer application, which I believe the priority deadline is March 15, but that's also a rolling application. So if you don't come into contact with Mount Holyoke until April and wanted to submit an application, I believe you're still able to do that. We also have a special pool or sort of population known as our Francis Perkins Scholars, and those are students who are either over the age of 25, have dependents, or are military veterans. Those students are able to apply and receive a full tuition scholarship under our Francis Perkins program, and that deadline is also March 15. Can you talk about funding opportunities for undocumented and DACA students? Sure, and so Ashley, I'll hop on this one as well. So we do welcome undocumented and DACA students to apply to Mount Holyoke. We are completely discreet with your status and make sure to follow really the same application process as if you were a typical domestic student. We read your application, your transcript, any of that information. In terms of funding for that, we ask that students, of course you won't submit a FAFSA, but we still ask that you submit a CSS profile that is specific to Mount Holyoke and ask a few questions to really help us understand what those finances look like. But similar to domestic and international students, we are committed to meeting 100% of your demonstrated need. And so we work closely with those students and their support systems to make sure that we can be as transparent and safe as possible. But absolutely, we do welcome students into our community and make sure that they have the same funding opportunities. And this is a question, I spoke a little bit about our transfer application. Do we have a prominent transfer student presence on campus? The answer is yes. I'm not sure what percentage of our community make up transfer students, but transfer students come in at any year. So we welcome them as transfer sophomores and juniors, and a few who are finishing up their senior credits, but not very many. And so predominantly in the sophomore and junior range, and they span all different majors. So you could be a humanities major, a social science major, a STEM major. They still have many of the same study abroad opportunities, as well as research opportunities and internship opportunities. There is a residency requirement, so we ask that many students live on campus. About 98% of our students do live on campus, and so our transfer students, sort of the expectations are sort of minimized in line with how many semesters you have left, but we also do have a very robust population. Those students are also a part of our athletics teams and different cultural organizations as well. So definitely a huge part of our community.
And there's also a living learning community, which is a space where you can opt into called Trendy Transfers. That's housed in our Wilder Hall residence hall. where everyone who lives on that floor is a transfer. So if that's the community that you want to place yourself in, you can.
Thanks so much, Ashley. And Ashley, I realize that we just have a few more minutes, so I'm wondering if you, I know you gave a little bit of advice during your story already, but I'm wondering if you can share a piece of advice that you have for juniors, especially navigating this kind of trying time where a lot of them are learning remotely and worried about what their application process might look like. So what might be a piece of advice that's college related or Mount Holyoke specific as well?
I guess like the biggest piece of advice I can give the junior year of high school is to kind of not put so much pressure on yourself. Like it's a time where grades like really matter and SAT and ACT scores like really matter. But the thing is like as far as colleges, like you will end up like where you are supposed to be. Um regardless of those scores because like you're a full package and you're just not your scores and you're not only your grades, like you are your essay, you are the things that you survived, you are the things that you accomplished, and like they do matter, but like they're not like the only thing that matter, and like you're bigger than that, and like you will get into school, and like literally just anything that like not like the generic anything you put your mind you can do, but like if you work for something and like you say this is something that I'm going to achieve, you will achieve it. And so like the fact that you are even studying for the SAT and that you're continuing to do your classes even when they're remote, like if you're applying to the right colleges, they will look at that and they will understand and they will notice the grit within you and know that like you are the type of person that they want at your college. Like you're not really like they need you. Like colleges need you. You like the students, like if you don't have great students, then you're not a good college. And so colleges need you. You don't need them. You're already great. So that's my advice.
Awesome. And Ashley, I think that's a great note to end on, is that every single person who's viewing this, likely a lot of juniors, but also adults, we need your interest and we want you to feel welcome by Mount Holyoke. And we see students from, as I said, 45 different states. North Carolina is one of them. And so we really love the students that we see, especially from the Durham area where I'm so lucky to be able to travel. And so definitely be in touch if you have any specific questions about how your story might fit into Mount Holyoke. If you have questions about grades, know that we will be flexible and we do understand the times that we're in. So as I said, and as Ashley just reiterated, we are looking at the full package. So we're looking at you in the context of what has happened, what we're all facing, how that might have impacted your grades and your performance. So definitely be in touch with us, and I'll definitely let your mentors know that they can share my email and Ashley's email as well. So you can be in touch with us throughout the summer. Our doors are still open. Our virtual doors are still open. So definitely be in touch. And thank you so much and good luck. Enjoy the rest of your week. And stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Aria and Ashley for joining us for this presentation. And thank you to everyone who also participated. Don't forget to fill out our survey, and that's my puppy, Manita, who's barking in the background.
Thank you so very much.